The garage. Behind the doors, we store the things of life. It could be something of great value, something new, something useful, or it could just be a place to collect the mess. It's the garage, a place of coming and going, of invention and connection, a place to dream. And that's where LCBC began, 35 years ago, in the garage.
Well, overhead projectors, what a great and amazing invention. And for us here at LCBC, it was actually Melissa Otto sitting on the steps of the stage, sliding the words on and off of the screen. And church basements and even garages, and we all have to start somewhere. And there's nothing wrong with starting in a church basement or actually in a garage. And so today we kick off a new series of studies that we're calling The Garage. And in this series, we're looking at the fact that God oftentimes uses our humble beginnings to do great things. But not only does God build great things from humble beginnings, God also has this uncanny ability to take our tragedies and turn our tragedies into something beautiful. God has this way of taking our suffering, of taking our pain and our disappointments and our hurts and turning them into things of beauty. Right now, you might describe yourself as just being disappointed. You'd say life hasn't turned out the way that you had planned. Or you'd say, you know what, my career, it hasn't unfolded the way I thought that it would. Or being married has not brought the pleasure to you that you thought it would. Or your son or your daughter has been a disappointment. Or your parents' marriage ended in divorce. And you say, you know what, life is hard. And perhaps you've experienced a devastating accident. Or maybe 18 months ago, COVID, it's just through these last 18 months, it's just destroyed your business. And what good could possibly come out of any of this? And about 2,800 years ago, there was a man who lived named Isaiah. And Isaiah was a prophet. A prophet was somebody who spoke on behalf of God. You see, 2,800 years ago, they didn't have Bibles. They didn't have God's words in writing. And so 2,800 years ago, God would actually speak directly to another man or a woman. And that man or that woman would tell everyone else what God had said to them. And these men, these women were known as prophets. And so God told Isaiah to tell the people that they were actually in big trouble. God told Isaiah to tell the people that they were about to be taken captive, that they were going to be overrun by another kingdom, and their life was about to really, really get hard, more than hard. Their life was actually going to become miserable, and what was about to happen to them was tragic. It was going to be bad. But in the midst of warning the people of this coming tragedy, Isaiah also reminded the people of the goodness of God. In the face of this coming doom and tragedy, Isaiah actually comforts the people with God's promise of hope and restoration. And again, Isaiah would speak of God's greatness, and he would talk about God's power. And to the people facing tragedy, Isaiah would actually say this. He would say, God, He will give beauty for ashes, joy instead of mourning, praise instead of despair. For the Lord has planted them, those who have endured tragedy, the Lord has planted them like strong and graceful oaks for His own glory. And the thing is, Isaiah's words spoken 2,800 years ago, they still ring true today. God is the master of turning our tragedies into things that are beautiful. And beauty for ashes, joy instead of mourning, praise instead of despair. Your tragedy, your disappointment, your hurts, your suffering, your pain. And so the idea of despair is just this complete sense of just losing all hope. It's just hopeless. And you know that feeling. It's when your circumstances press in around you to the extent that you just can't see any way out of the situation, and it just feels like it's hopeless. And you feel hopeless, and you feel overcome by fear. And here's the thing, whenever fear grips us, hopelessness is right behind, and fear sets in, and you feel hopeless, and you find yourself in the midst of despair. And so Isaiah says, look, don't lose hope. Whatever circumstances you find yourself in today, don't lose hope. Because God is the master of exchanges, and He'll exchange beauty for ashes and joy instead of mourning and praise instead of despair. Now, I know that in the midst of tragedy, it's easy to despair. It's easy to actually lose hope. In the midst of tragedy, it's easy to doubt that God is ever really going to show up. And in the midst of tragedy, it is so easy to question, God, what are you doing? And in the midst of tragedy, it's so easy to wonder, why in the world, God, would you allow this to have happened in the first place? But here's the thing about God, and here's what you and I need to remember constantly about God is God doesn't do things the way we do things. And God doesn't think about things the way that we think about things. And God's ways are not our ways. Again, God speaking to Isaiah, he actually said this to the prophet Isaiah. He said, my thoughts are completely different from yours. Completely different. My ways are far beyond anything you could imagine. For just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. He says, I just think and do and act differently than you. And it's because of God's ways being so different, his thoughts being so different from ours, that again, Isaiah says, so don't lose hope. Whatever your circumstances, don't lose hope. Because God is the master of exchanges. He exchanges beauty for ashes. He exchanges joy for mourning and praise instead of despair. And I know it's one thing to actually talk about God and God exchanging beauty for ashes, but it's a whole other thing to actually live it. It's a whole different thing to have to wait for this exchange to actually take place. I mean, waiting for God to do something good out of something bad, it's incredibly difficult. And you might say, David, look, I've been waiting for a long time. I don't know that I can hold on much longer. I don't know how much longer I can wait. And so can I just give you a few words of encouragement while you wait? Words of encouragement from others that have actually experienced despair themselves. Words from people who have had to wait for God to exchange their tragedy for beauty. And here's some words of encouragement straight out of the Bible. And my encouragement to you is that with everything inside of you, hold on to these words from those who have actually experienced despair firsthand. And like when you find yourself feeling very much afraid, hold on to the words of Jeremiah, who actually said to God, I called on your name, Lord, from deep within the well, and you actually heard me. You listened to my pleading. You heard my weeping. Yes, you came to my despairing cry and told me, do not fear. So you heard me, God. It's amazing. Or when you find yourself sad and just kind of distressed and maybe even a little bit depressed, grab hold of the words of David. When David actually said to God, I waited patiently for you to help me, Lord, and you turned to me. And you heard my cry. You lifted me out of the pit of despair and out of the mud and the mire. You set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. You have given me a new song to sing. You have given me a hope, a hymn of praise to sing. And many will see that you have done what you have done and be astounded. And they will put their trust in you, God. And David says, I was full of despair. I was discouraged. I don't know that I could have done any more in waiting for you. And you heard my cry. When you find yourself feeling as though God has forgotten all about you, and you say, I don't even know that God knows of my situation now, can I just give you some words from Jesus? When Jesus actually said, look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or put food in barns because your heavenly Father actually feeds them, and you are more valuable than they are. You're more valuable than the birds. You are not, Jesus is saying, forgotten. You have not been forgotten. And when you find yourself just completely tired and just worn out and exhausted, and you just go, I don't know if I can make it anymore. I don't know if I can do this another day. Then can I just say, this is what Jesus actually says to you. He says, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke fits perfectly, and my burden I give to you is light. And I understand what it feels like to be just tired and worn out and ready to give up. I understand that God may not be showing up for you in ways that you had hoped that he would. I understand that God may not be doing what you had hoped that he would do. I understand that you may be full of despair, but in the midst of your pain, can I just remind you and encourage you to hang on, that God's ways are not your ways. And see, in God's way, we wouldn't do it that way. We would never choose tragedy for our own lives. Nobody in their right mind would actually say, oh, I would choose tragedy for my life. And God's timing, his timing is not our timing. I mean, if we were in charge, we would never have to wait for things to be resolved. And to be honest, if there actually has to be tragedy in the world, we'd never choose it to happen to us. I mean, maybe, I hate to do it to somebody else, but for sure not me. But seriously, God knows us, and he knows what we need, and he knows what's best for us. And So I want to tell you about Daryl and about Daryl's family. Growing up, Daryl was a typical farmer's kid, had two sisters. Daryl's mom and dad both came from very humble beginnings. They both loved life. They loved their family. They both loved Jesus. And even though they didn't have much, they had very little when they started out. By the time they were married, Don and Joyce were very generous with the little bit that they had. And seemingly, God began to bless Don and Joyce. Their little farming operation began to grow, and the more their business would grow, the more generous Don and Joyce became. And Don and Joyce had always had this focus on others, so much so that one time Don actually took a piece of wood and carved the word others on that piece of wood, and then he took it as a sign and he put it up above their kitchen door that led out to the garage, and it just said others, just as a way to remind the entire family that life wasn't about them, it really was about serving others. And then tragedy hit Don and Joyce's family. At the age of 16, Daryl was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and Don and Joyce sought the very best treatment for Daryl they could find, and they trusted God to heal their son. And after years and years of just failed treatments and unanswered prayers, Don and Joyce found themselves in the midst of despair. And it just seemed hopeless for Daryl. But before fully giving in to this brain tumor, Don and Joyce decided to invite a group of friends to come and meet in their garage just in order to pray and ask God to work a miracle in Daryl's life. So weekly, this group would show up and they would meet, crying out to God on behalf of Daryl. Weeks went by and then months, and the tumor never went away. And so they continued to meet. And Daryl's ability to live and his function deteriorated until he actually died in 2007 at the age of 46. And you look at his life and you go, what a tragedy. I mean, here's a man whose quality of life was taken away. He died way too early at the age of 46. Or here's a mom and a dad who loved God, a man and a woman who loved their children and had such dreams for Daryl's life and who were generous with their finances. They were good people, and why would God allow this to happen to good people? And yet Daryl struggles through life and he dies at the age of 46. And you go, where's the beauty in that? Show me something beautiful out of that. And that's where we have to remember that God's ways are not our ways. And so I actually do want to show you some of what God was doing and what he's done since Daryl was first diagnosed with a tumor. You see, in 1986, after a few months of gathering to meet and pray for Daryl, this little group of 35 to 40 people decided they were going to start a new church, but they didn't want it to be just any church. They wanted it to be a church that was actually focused on introducing others, introducing people to Jesus. And you would like to think that all churches are about that. But sadly, that's not true. Not all churches are focused on introducing people to Jesus, but that was what this little group was about. And they called their new little church Lancaster County Bible Church. And they were ambitious. It was going to be a church for the whole county. And by 1991, the group had actually grown enough to build its first building out in the middle of a cornfield in Manheim. And they invited a young couple from Texas to come and be their pastor. And in 1991, that's when Lancaster County Bible Church informally became LCBC Church. And LCBC Church is a name that didn't describe a location. It didn't describe a place. Instead, it was a name that described its people whose lives were being changed by Jesus Christ. And in 1995, the group had grown to around 450 people, and they had to ask themselves the question, are we done introducing more people to Jesus? And they were out of space, had to have more gatherings, and the answer was no, we're not yet finished. And so they began adding more and more gatherings each weekend. And by 2001, the group had grown to 1,200 people, and again, out of space. And so the question was asked one more time, are we done introducing people to Jesus? And once again, the answer was no, we're not yet finished. And it was actually about that same time that there was a clip from the movie The Titanic that greatly impacted the church. And in one particular scene, the Titanic has sunk and thousands of people are left to die in the icy waters of the North Atlantic, even though there was plenty of room in half-filled lifeboats. But you see, these already half-filled lifeboats, those in the lifeboats, they didn't want to take the risk of going back to save those that were still in the water. And it was in that moment that we began to describe ourselves as a church that's actually a lifeboat. We're not a cruise ship, we're a lifeboat. And the decision was made that we would never become a church that's more concerned about those who are already in the lifeboat, but instead our first concern would be for those who still needed rescue. And we were determined that we were going to be a church that focused on others. And 2003, Mannheim was expanded and grew to about 3,000 people. But by 2005, the church had grown to about 6,000 people. We were again out of space. And when we went to apply for building permits, the township said, you know what? Sorry, you can't expand anymore. You're already too big and disrupting our cornfields. And so again, we had to ask the question, are we done introducing people to Jesus? And it was also about this time that we had this growing sense of concern for others around the world that also needed to be introduced to Jesus. And so it was at that time we began partnering with World Vision to sponsor children. And the goal was to transform one community in Kenya, the community of Sukuru. In 2007, our second campus was launched in a school in Harrisburg. And our third location came in 2010 in Lancaster City. And then there was actually one memorable weekend around the church in 2011 where we decided that we were going to use a song that ended up both mesmerizing people and at the same time it drove a lot of people away from the church. If you were here in 2011, you probably remember it. The song sounded like this. Yeah, and then after that came a slew of new campuses from York to Ephrata, Branch Creek, Columbia, Montour, and Berks. And as we grew to over 13,000 people on each weekend, in 2015, we actually sensed that we weren't done introducing people to Jesus. And we actually sensed that God was nudging us and challenging us to introduce people to Jesus all across the state of Pennsylvania. But it wasn't just about LCBC Church. It really was about working with other like-minded churches to impact our state with the good news of Jesus Christ. So we began working with churches across the state. And then came Waynesboro and Hazleton and Hanover. And 2018, Cole Township and West Shore came along. And about that same time, in 2018, we started putting our gatherings online, never dreaming how important that would become less than 2 years later. That was followed by Lebanon and Northern Dauphin and more recently Higgins. And then just this year, we were joined by Dixon City and Clark Summit and Wilkes-Barre. And today, this is kind of fun. Today, our global impact has continued to expand as all of you, are now sponsoring 5,456 kids in about 7 or 8 communities around the world. That's 5,456 kids whose lives are different today and whose lives will be different for eternity because of you. And I just think that's an amazing thing. And now when we actually combine our online with our in-person numbers, in September we actually averaged together as a church 19,325 people each and every weekend. And I just think that's incredible. And you think about it. I see, I've been hoping you'd applause all along here, so I'm glad that you did. As I think about it, thousands of lives across Pennsylvania have been impacted. Thousands of lives are being impacted. Thousands of lives around the world are being impacted and changed. And you can take it all the way back to one boy named Daryl, who tragically was diagnosed with a brain tumor at the age of 16. And what's fascinating to me is all of us are a part of Daryl's story. You and I are lives that have been changed by Christ, are being changed by Christ because of, in part, Daryl's tragedy. And stop and say, did it ever get easier for Daryl? No, it didn't. Did it ever feel good to Don and Joyce and his sisters Doreen and Donita? No, it didn't. But Don and Joyce both entered heaven, truly believing that in the midst of Daryl's tragedy, God did exchange beauty for ashes, and he did change joy for mourning and praise instead of despair. And can I give you one more example of how God takes tragedy and he turns it into something amazing? For the last 18 months, all of our lives have been impacted by COVID, but God wasn't caught off guard by COVID, and God wasn't surprised. And in the midst of this tragedy that we call COVID, God has been doing some amazing things. And so I want to introduce you to Lucy and Lillian. And you probably don't know Lucy and Lillian, but you are a part of Lucy and Lillian's story. And this part of their story began when God took online gatherings we reluctantly started in 2018 to prepare us for COVID that was coming 2 years later in a way that we would never have imagined. And God continues to use our online gatherings to change lives all around us. Listen to Lucy and Lillian's story.
I can't remember back to that day without crying. For real, my life was changed. And it's all because My sister-in-law lives in Pennsylvania, who goes to LCBC, and my other sister-in-law decided to get baptized and invited me. My name's Lillian Kreco. I live in New York, in Putnam County, and currently I watch LCBC online.
My name is Lucy, and I live in Mahopac, New York. I went to Catholic school my whole life, literally since I was in first grade. I always had a basis of my faith. I just never really felt it exactly, but, went through the motions of it. Over the years, I had gone to my sister's house. She lives in Lancaster. A couple of times we would go to church, and I think I had been there to LCBC maybe 2 or 3 times. Then it was COVID that happened, and just found that I could watch it online, and I was doing that every week. And the more I was doing it, it just hit home for me. And then they were talking one week about baptism, but I don't know. And plus that could never happen because I'm in New York, so I'm sure that's not even possible. I just decided to do it because he knows that I want to follow him, and this is my way of showing him I want to follow him.
When she called me and she told me she was coming to Pennsylvania, I thought we were just going to see my other sister-in-law, Simi, but she told me she was being baptized, and I was like, yeah, I'll be there. Of course, I wanted to be there to support her in the decision she made. I drove to Lancaster with my daughter for Lucy's baptism, and I was excited for her. I was really happy for her, and I felt like she was happy. I saw a change in her. We went to LCBC in Lancaster City. I saw the cross, I saw the pool, and then the music started playing. And I'm like watching the words on the screen, and I just started crying. And then they were showing all the baptisms. When it was Lucy's turn, I saw her walk on stage with my sister-in-law, Simi. She got in the water, and as she was going down, I held my breath with her. And the minute she came up, something changed. And I can't explain it. I don't know how to explain it. It was something I never felt before. We went back to the house and, we were fine. But it's when I came back home, I was like obsessed. I was obsessed with Jesus, getting to know him. Every day I would come home and I would find something about the Bible and I would watch that. And then I said, I got to get myself a Bible, and that's what I did. Got myself a Bible and started reading. I wanted Jesus in my life. I was actually talking to my sister-in-law, Lucy, and we were just talking, and I said, I love what this has done for you. And I said, one of these days I want to get to that place. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, I want to be good enough to get to where you are. She goes, well, no one's ever good enough. She sent me like a little thing of what I have it on my phone, and just a couple things that you gotta, believe and know that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, that we're a sinner and we want to be helped. And I was like, that's it? She's like, yeah, that's it. And I'm like, really? Like, that's so easy. Like, you sure about that? Like, I was questioning her. And she goes, that's it. My life itself hasn't changed. I feel like I've changed. Everything's still the same around me. I just feel at peace. At one point, I said, I want to be baptized as well. And then I sent an email, and I'm going to go back to Lancaster City to get baptized on October 31st.
My name is Lucy.
I'm Lillian Kreco, and I'm a life changed by Christ.
So I love hearing their story, and where God takes something that we think is tragic, we think that something is just, what is this whole thing with COVID? And yet God is his way, his plan. I don't understand it. I don't understand him, but he's doing his thing, and lives are being changed. And Lucy and Lillian are going to be a part of heaven because of what God is doing in the midst of COVID. And here's the thing, inevitably, each one of us are going to experience suffering and mourning in our lives, maybe even to the point of driving us to the brink of despair. But in the midst of that, we've got to remember God exchanges beauty for ashes. He exchanges joy for mourning and praise for despair. And I don't know how he's going to do it in your life. And I don't even know when he's going to do it in your life. But here's what I do know. He is going to do it. He's going to do something amazing in your life. Now, let me just end with one more word of encouragement. Again, from the prophet Isaiah. See, God was speaking through the prophet Isaiah, and God speaks again, and God speaks these words to you and me into the tragedies that we experience. God says, do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you go through deep waters and great trouble, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you, for I am the Lord, your God. And what God is saying to you right now is in the midst of your tragedy, he will never, ever leave you alone. So here's what I want to do. I want to pray with you and ask God for each and every one of us with you. To say, God, in the midst of whatever we're experiencing, in the midst of whatever we're going through, that we would know that you're with us, that we would experience your sense, your peace, your presence in our lives, trusting you, that even though it's not the way we would do things, even though it's not the things that we like necessarily, that you are working and you're going to turn our situation into something of beauty. So I want to ask you to stand with me, if you would. Across all of our locations, online even, just stand with me and let me pray with you. And then after I pray, we're going to sing and say, God, thank you for not leaving us alone. Thank you for being with us in the midst of the storm. So pray with me if you would. Heavenly Father, we stand before you today and we just say, thank you for loving us. How amazing it is that you this great, incredibly all-powerful God, all-knowing, all-powerful, the creator of the universe, and yet you choose to reach down into our lives, my life, that you care about me. As Jesus said, you know the birds, and you care about the birds. How much more do you care for me, for us? And yet, Father, we stand before you, and sometimes we're not sure what you're doing. Question and we get frustrated and maybe even experience despair, or we just feel like it's hopeless. God, are you really there? Are you really going to do something? Father, I would ask that in the midst of our tragedies today, I would ask in the midst of our hopelessness today, our suffering, our pain, our disappointments with life, that today, right now, you would begin to make yourself known to us. That we would trust you and we would experience you in a brand new way. That we would begin to lean into you and realize, God, you've got this. And we just need to follow you and stay with you. And that you're going to take our pain and you're going to turn it into something beautiful. And you're going to take our despair and turn it into joy. Heavenly Father, thank you that you don't leave us alone. Thank you that whatever we walk through, you are with us. And you're going to guide us and be with us and comfort us each step of the way. May we know that today. God, thank you for loving us, and we love you, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
When the heart is under fire, is another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. Come on, let's remind each other the goodness of God through His Son Jesus. Sing it out. Oh, my dad left for dead beneath the water. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. Should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning? Either way, I won't bow to the things of this world. Oh, I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding, will power set me free? There is a grave that holds nobody, now that power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Whoa, there is another in the fire. Whoa, there is another in the fire. Whoa, there is another in the fire. Oh, I can see the light. I can see the light in the darkness. When the darkness bows to Him, I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between words thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us when the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. Oh, nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come with me in the space between all the things unseen and this reckoning. Oh, I know I will never be alone. Oh, I know it's true. I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another where you'll be.
Whatever your experience, realize you're not alone. Whatever your experience, realize God is working and He's moving and He's bringing about something in your life that right now may seem impossible, that anything good could possibly come. But God says, my ways are different than your ways, and my mind and my thoughts are different than your thoughts. And so lean into Him, trust Him in the midst of your despair. If you'd like to talk or pray with somebody about anything today, whatever you're experiencing right now, if you're joining us online, the chat on the screen will be open for you. Let us know how we can pray for you. Or anytime you can go to the website and click on the prayer button, let us know how we can be praying with you. Or if you happen to be in person at one of our 18 locations, as we close this gathering, there'll be people up in the front left corner of each of our auditoriums that would actually love to pray with you. And can I just thank you and encourage you to continue praying as a church family for our high school girls, our accident a week ago, and thank you for praying for them, and continue to pray. And if you want updates, you can go to the website and learn further how to continue to pray. As you leave today, just as a reminder that as a church, we're all about introducing other people to Jesus. We actually did what Don Hershey did, and we've taken pieces of wood and we put the word others on it, similar to the one that Don hung above his door that his family would see each day they went out of the house. And so we have one for you, for your family to take home and place it wherever you're going to see it and remember it. And remember that we're here to serve others. You can grab those in the atriums as you leave today. And then don't forget, coming up in less than 2 weeks, well-known author, marriage counselor Gary Chapman is going to be with us for the 5 Love Languages conferences. And I to be honest with you, I can't think of a better way to spend a few hours on a Friday evening, a few hours on a Saturday morning, than to strengthen your marriage and your relationships. And you can get more information and sign up for that at the website as well. Well, LCBC today, in the midst of whatever you may be experiencing this week and in the days to come, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you His favor and give you His peace. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.